Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. I did promise that we would be back on track after my short break. So following on from the last interview with Philip Kinsella, who came on to talk about the alien grey agenda, we now have David Ditchfield, who is coming on to discuss his near-death experience, which is a fascinating subject. It's one I've looked into quite a lot really over the years, on and off. So David's going to come on and talk about the time that he basically got run over by a train. A horrible experience, I imagine. He will talk us through that, how that felt. And, well, I guess unless it happens to you, you can't really imagine something like that happening. And it was once he was taken to the hospital after the accident, he had his experience. And I'm not going to go into too much detail now. Obviously, don't want to ruin it for David during the interview. It's something for you to look forward to. But I hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all keeping safe and looking after yourself and each other. Before we get on with the interview with David, I'd just kind of like to point you listeners towards a recent presentation that I gave as part of the Festival of the Unexplained. If you're on our Facebook group or page, you would have seen this advertised there. It was, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now at the time of recording this. I did a 1 hour live presentation as part of this 2-day festival, where I decided to discuss TV programs, so the entertainment side, the entertainment industry of the paranormal world, and I'm sure you all know my views on that now. And then decided to discuss modern technology and what's going on there in terms of, is it a good thing, is it a bad thing, is it helping aid the future of paranormal investigations, or is it hindering it? I'm sure if you listen to my last episode in the intro, I discussed a previous investigation that I'd been on not long before and hadn't had the best experience really when it came to people using certain equipment and modern technology, and it kind of inspired this presentation really and where to take it. And I think I'm going to make it into a bit of a bigger presentation for when I'm allowed back out talking to groups, which hopefully will be soon. I've been booked to go to Truth Seekers Northeast to go and give a talk to Maureen and her group again, which I did last year, which I thoroughly enjoyed up in Newcastle. I've been booked to go back there in October, so if you're around that area, I know there's a few of my listeners that come from that area. I'll make sure to give the date closer to the time. Please come along and meet up, and it'd be great to meet up and have a chat with you guys. So that should be good. And I know there's a few other groups that are getting up and running again now, in probably not in their normal locations. I know that Truth Seekers Northeast aren't meeting in their normal location. They're meeting in a place that has a smaller occupancy, because their usual place hasn't opened again yet. And it's a shame, these groups are fantastic places to go, and I encourage all of you. I'm not sure what it's like overseas in America or wherever you're listening, but here in England, it's a fantastic little community, and it's really close knit, and everybody knows everybody on the circuit, so to speak, and people go from one group to another, and it's a really good family feel. And I do enjoy going to these groups. Not always as a speaker. I do tend to go and just listen to other presenters and listen to what they've got to say, and meet up with some old friends, and always make new ones. That's a guarantee. If you go somewhere like this, you'll always meet like-minded people and make some good friends. And I've made plenty of good friends over the past couple of years since I've started doing this, which is always a good thing really. So without further ado, let's start the interview with David. Really looking forward to this. It's a subject I've wanted to tackle on this show for a while. Hopefully you enjoy it. It should be good. So on with the interview. And it is my pleasure to welcome David to the show. David, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Great to be here, Kieran.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I know Gav put us in touch with each other. He does often send some wonderful guests my way. And I must say, your kind of story and your background is one I've been most excited about for a long time. Near-death experience is something I've been looking into for a while. Because in my opinion, people that have kind of experienced this are the closest we'll ever get to knowing if spirits do exist and what exactly they are. So thank you for coming on. Would you just like to give us a brief background, obviously, to how this all happened? So there was the train accident, which must have been a horrible situation to find yourself in. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, I was seeing a friend off at the rail station, and I was helping her onto the carriage with her bags, and I just gave her a hug and a kiss goodbye. And then I heard the emergency doors buzzers going, so I thought I'd better get off. So as I stepped back, the bottom quarter of my coat it was like a sheepskin coat, got trapped in the doors as they closed, and they slammed to, and I couldn't pull it free. So I tried everything, I turned around, called for a guard, shouted out really loud, but nobody turned up. I was banging on the windows and all sorts, and anyhow, I looked into the eyes of my friend Anna, and I just saw the look of sheer horror in her eyes, because we just thought, this is it, And the train started pulling out the station at terrific speed. They really do accelerate out of those stations, and you don't really think about it when you're on one, do you? But
no.
But you do when you're on the outside and trapped. And it was so it was extremely frightening. And I lost my footing eventually, and I got dragged along the platform and then sucked in between the gap of the platform edge and the actual train itself that was going at high speed by that point. And then I just got pulled right into the gates of hell, if you like. It was just like, it was a horrible moment of violent, agony, and being thrown around all over the place relentlessly, and fully conscious throughout the whole thing. So it was terrifying. And then I suddenly found myself being thrown down in between the tracks as the train was continuing on. And I just kind of kept my head down, and my nose was in the oily gravel, just, praying that I would survive it. And obviously I did, by a miracle, and there I was. And the trains seemed to take forever to move on, but it did, thankfully, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's what I find interesting there is you seem to remember everything. I mean, it's one of those where people that have fallen downstairs or have been in car accidents, I don't know if it's the adrenaline or what, but they don't really remember every little detail. They kind of black out a little bit. I don't know if it's the conscious mind kind of wanting to ignore all the pain. But I find it interesting that you seem to remember quite a lot of detail there.
I think it's because I anticipated it all coming, if you like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I went into survival mode because I knew that I was in danger. If you're in a car crash, it happens within an instant. A car will, if it's a head-on collision, it happens instantly. Whereas with me, I thought, right, I've got time to think this through, and so I was in survival mode. So all the time I was just, I was like almost like putting myself in a 007 situation where, it's true. Whenever you see Roger Moore or whatever, you think, well, he seems to be remaining pretty calm and thinking this one through. So I thought, I've got to do the same. and that's the truth. I really did. I just thought, right, think of 007. What would he do now?
Well, it's crazy what kind of comes into your mind when you're staring death in the face.
Absolutely.
I mean, did the old that old saying, life flashed before my eyes? Did that actually happen during that time?
It didn't do, no, not at that time at all, because I was still just really trying to make sure that I was going to survive it, and so I was just thinking it all through. So that didn't actually happen. No. Okay. It's almost like everything slowed down, because the rail police did a massive inquiry on it, and when they did all their calculations and looked at the CCTV footage, I asked them how long it took from the moment of it pulling out and me going under, and they said it was 13 and a half seconds, I think it was, or something like that. And to me, it felt more like minutes. It felt like it went on for ages, and so it's strange how the mind works, and it really is. And that is quite common as well. I saw an interesting program recently where an American guy does research into the brain, and he talked about that. He said that if people are faced in situations where they can anticipate that they're about to die, that the mind actually, it's not going through slow motion, but it's what seems like them minutes is literally only seconds, and they have time to think it through, to try.
That's interesting. I mean, slightly off topic, but you hear about high class sports people who, like footballers or that, and they tend to have a lot of skill, and it almost feels like they've got a lot of time on the ball or doing what they're doing, and they actually think that there's something in the brain that it almost seems like time is slowed down for them when they're in the moment.
That's right, yeah.
And they can kind of react to something, someone coming to tackle them, so they know what to do to get out of the way. So there's definitely something in that with the human mind being able to, I guess, portray time in a different way. And a whole different podcast episode is probably to discuss if time is what we believe it is. But I think that's a completely different episode. So as this happened and you did get sucked under, I guess at some point you transitioned really from the physical world into having this afterlife experience.
Yeah.
But was there a transition, or was it just kind of, click and you were there?
It didn't happen until I got to the hospital, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Basically, I'd arrived in the A&E department, and I was losing copious amounts of blood by then because my left arm had been severed from the elbow down, and it was when they were just getting me ready to go into theatre to operate on me that I suddenly left my body, and the transition was pretty instantaneous. Yeah, I'd gone from being in complete agony, and there being a lot of frantic stuff. I was actually fearing for my life at that point because the doctor sounded pretty sort of nervous, to say the least. You know? And I figured, when I actually did transition, I actually believed instantaneously that I hadn't made it. I thought, okay, this is it. I have died. This is the afterlife, and I'm here. But I didn't resist it either. I didn't sort of think, oh, no, like some people do resist it. I've read other tales, people saying they see the light and they want to go back, and they do come back. But for me, I just went with it. And I was quite happy to be in that scenario because I was in so much agony, and it was just so horrible what I'd just been through. And I just lay there in this, what felt like a darkened room, like a darkened space, but a comfortable darkened space, not like a frightening dark.
Yeah.
And I suddenly looked around, there was and I just saw these kind of like pulsating colours. They were like orbs that were slowly pulsating all around me, and that calmed me right from the off. And I just thought, wow, where am I? This is really beautiful. And I looked to try and, as you do, you just check out where you are. And I looked and I noticed that I was no longer on a hospital trolley. I was now laid on this like big slate rock, like a big medieval rock, if you like. And it's like, I say medieval, like, you see these old altars and stuff, and you see them in movies and whatever.
Almost
so
like a sacrificial altar, though.
That's
what I've got in my mind, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, bang on, yeah. So, but it was really comfortable. I mean, I noticed that I was no longer clothed, but it was very comfortable to lie on, which was really strange. Then the next thing I saw was that all my wounds were completely healed. There wasn't even a single scratch or bruise. And so that was amazing. And as I say, all the pain had just completely gone. And so there was no pain and there was no injuries. And I was just covered in this blue sort of satin or silk sort of sheet, which just felt very calming. So I laid my head back onto this rock. And when I did, I looked up and I saw these like 3 grids of white light. It was closing in on me. And I couldn't take my gaze away from this light because even though it was very intense and very bright, normally, in real time, you wouldn't be able to do it. It would just be too bright to look at. Yeah. But this was fine. And this was actually lovely to look into because it was like, it was healing me, and it felt great and very hypnotic. Then at that point, I felt that there was a presence. I felt there was somebody here with me. And so I kind of lifted my head and just at the right of my feet, I saw this like a being of light, an androgynous sort of form.
Okay.
And and I just figured, wow, who are you? And it was just this form of light. When I say form of light, it was a very human form, but the skin was like glowing, radiating light from within, and there was like this pure white blonde hair and this expression that I still can't get out of my mind now. It was just this beautiful, calming expression, just looking at me and smiling, and I felt protected by this being. But I thought, who are you? I know you really well, don't I? And I just couldn't figure it out where from. But I felt that I'd known this being throughout the whole of my life and beyond, previous life as well, maybe. And so I felt guarded at that point. So
I find it interesting that you talk about you had a body, because there are several instances that I've looked into where people no longer have a body, and they just feel like they're now consciousness, almost floating in the air. So I find it interesting that you still describe the fact that you had your body was there, and this being was presenting itself in a humanoid kind of figure. Do you think that that was done on purpose as to not panic you, maybe, because you recognize a human being? So did they kind of put that shape on so you felt more comforted?
I think you're right on that, because as I said, the person's face was very familiar as well. So it wasn't like there was no sort of, it was very much a human form, but beyond that, it was a familiar face. And I still can't figure out. I've still got it printed on my mind, but I think one of these days I'm going to come across an old photograph of someone or whatever, and it's going to be, oh my god, that's that person. Yeah, that is the one. Yeah. So I guess you're right in that state. That I was given those things to make me feel comfortable. I mean, in terms of my seeing my own physical body, that's only because I looked, because I knew what kind of state I was in. I'd seen how my body had been ripped up, so it was the first instinct, as you would do, would be to check that out. So that's why I saw my physical form. But it's interesting because it felt like it was me. It felt like it was me in that body, but in a sense it didn't as well. It's hard to, there's always contradictions, if you like, in NDEs, because it's a different realm altogether. It's real, it's ultra real, and it's as real as I'm sat here talking to you now, but it's a different place altogether. It's a different sphere.
Yeah. I mean, would you describe that place as, I'm not a religious person whatsoever, would you describe that place as close to heaven as that's what we're told it is? Would you say that's where you were, or were you more of maybe a purgatory type place, like a middle ground?
It was I'll tell you what it felt like. It felt like it was the next stage on that we all go to, basically. And I'm not saying that is heaven, but it felt like I was being prepared for something, to go on to somewhere from there. It was almost like an emergency department on the other side.
Yeah, like a waiting room.
Yeah, like a waiting room. Yeah. So I did feel like it was the next stage, and that's why I firmly believe now. It's like I lost my mother last summer, and I just figured, although I went through the physical loss of her, that I knew it's instantly where she was. I thought, I know where you are now. I know what place you're in, and you're going to love it. And so but I never use the phrase heaven. I never say that I went to heaven. But in terms of if the next stage is heaven, then it's going to be absolutely amazing, because where I was felt heavenly, because it just felt, everything about it was just there was an awful lot of love there. Yeah. There was love, was unconditional love as well, was the most powerful aspect of the whole experience.
So the being that was kind of showed itself to you, were you aware of any other entities there? And what did this being do at this point?
Two more beings suddenly appeared either side of me in female form. I didn't recognize their faces. One was like sort of white European looking with long brown hair and wearing like a simple contemporary brown dress. And then the other one was more Asian Indian, American Indian in appearance, and she was wearing like more traditional sort of dress. And they were just healing me. They got their hands sort of slowly hovering over my body, and again, this sensation of love was coming through their hands. It was just really powerful. It was just it's a feeling like I've never had before, and still haven't since. Which is like it's almost like every molecule in my body was kind of vibrating with this sensation of love. It was just fantastic. And so those are the next two.
Okay, and then so I mean you must have heard of Reiki and that kind of healing that is done by many, and I've had it done myself by several of my friends who are practitioners of it.
Yeah,
and I do find that interesting because what you described there is what I tend to feel. You do get a warmth off them as they're doing it, and you do feel like they are kind of manipulating your muscles or your energy flow.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt?
Well, what I figured was that first of all, I thought, well, they're obviously healing my body, and then I thought, well, they probably are because that's part of me. But really, ultimately, they were healing my soul because my whole life prior to all this had been pretty chaotic and had been quite a mess, and I was on a downward spiral. So, I got a lot to heal. So I felt like they were healing, the wounds of the past within my soul, if you like. So,
did they ever communicate with you? Maybe not.
It was
verbally, but in your mind, or
yeah. The communication was all telepathic. So there was no spoken word. There was nobody actually speaking to me, but it was all through telepathy. Yeah, and I was being, I realised that I was being given knowledge. I was being made to feel calm to start with, and made to feel okay, and to for the first time in my life to forget about all the guilt and the shame that I'd carried throughout my whole life, and I suddenly was now feeling it's all right. It's not my fault. I hadn't messed up. And it was really wonderful to feel that, and all the sense of guilt just dispersed from me.
Yeah, and then so obviously this was such a huge experience in your lifetime, but at some point you got pulled back into the physical world. Are you aware now of how long that experience? How long did it feel like it lasted, and how long did it actually last?
Yeah, it's interesting because. Most people will say this as well. I've had the NDEs. Is that the times becomes irrelevant. And the reason that I was being told at that time was irrelevant was because I was actually living in the moment, and I realised that most of us live our lives we live in the past. We're thinking about the past, either things were better in the past, or we messed up in the past, or we're living in the future, worrying about the future. We don't spend enough time living in the present. And when I was there, I realized that I was actually living in the present, and there was no past or future anymore. There was no sense of shame or guilt about what had happened before, and there was no sense of wondering where I was going to go next, or wondering what was going to happen. I just accepted where I was. So it's like there were a few other events that would unfold as time went on, but it's still hard to sort of really say, oh yeah, it lasted 10 minutes, 20, 15, or half an hour, whatever. It's I'm sure in real terms here on Earth it probably only lasted minutes, but but again, we're not going to talk about time in this podcast, are we?
No.
But it's a big. It's become relevant in my life now to explore the whole aspect of time.
I mean, let's sod it. Let's do it. I mean, for me, something I've been researching lately is the fact that time is potentially not linear. And the reason your story speaks so much to me is because my paranormal research has taken me down roads where it's linked very closely to living within a holographic world, a holographic universe, where everything is just operating on frequencies. And in that sense, time isn't linear. It's all happening right now. And again, it's so interesting to have another guest on that is talking like you are, almost backing that up, saying that there was no kind of, there was no past, there was no future. You're just kind of living in the now.
Yeah.
So I find it fascinating that it kind of pushed you down that route to kind of, look at what time means now in the real world, because we are massively restrained by the clock, aren't we? We clock in, we clock out. I'll meet you at this time. I've got to be home at this time. Do you find that puts a huge limitation on the physical realm that we live in?
Absolutely, it really does. It's because it's crazy to spend time worrying about what's happened in the past, or spend time worrying about how the future is going to turn out, because as I say, neither of them exist now. The only thing that exists is the here and now. I mean, an interesting example is basically what's been happening this year, and that is, I felt that when the whole pandemic thing first happened, that it was amazing just to see. I couldn't believe it. I mean, none of us can still, to see that the whole world had been affected by something like this, and we'd literally been put in that situation where everything just stopped. It felt like the world was knocked off kilter initially, and then it just had to stop. We had to stop societies. All our societies were no longer functioning in the way they were before, and that was all based on time and like everything down to the minute, And people were like, first of all, embracing it. They panicked at first by stripping the supermarket shelves of toilet roll and stuff. But after that calmed down, people were starting to like think, well, I'm not worried about time now, so I'm going to start baking cakes and baking my own bread, teaching the kids and stuff. And that was just, it reminded me of that aspect. I thought, well, that's a positive thing to come out of this whole lockdown period is that it's causing us to do that, to let go of all this kind of chasing the clock and worrying about the future. Everybody thought, well, we're all in this together now. There's no point in worrying about the future because there's nothing we can do about it, which is interesting.
I think for me, you've hit the nail on the head. It's whatever your opinions on what's going on at the moment, what it has done is it's allowed people to find themselves again.
Yeah.
In one way or another, to focus on their passions that they didn't have time to do before. There's that word, time again.
Yeah.
I guess to see themselves as a father or a husband or whatever, or a wife or whatever you might be, and to research that role a bit more within yourself, and to kind of really, for me, I've just had a son, so it's really helped bond, in that sense. And I think that's the same worldwide. So there's a huge amount of negatives going on at the moment, but if there was one big positive, I would have to agree with you that is it. And it's interesting that you're comparing that sense, that I've just described there with what you felt when you had this, kind of out of body experience. Maybe is it something that's happening for a reason, do you think?
I do think it's all part of evolution. We tend to forget that. I mean, obviously, it's a huge shock to us because we've never had anything like this happen in our lifetimes, But I think, there's been plagues and there's been worse than that. There's been sort of ice ages and stuff like that. Every now and again, the Earth does tip off kilter. So, we're not doing too bad out of it. But I don't believe that it's kind of like, oh, this has been sent as a sort of like warning that we were just going too far and blah, blah, blah. That everything does happen for a reason. So I'm sure, that it's, but I just hope we can learn from it. That's the only thing. And that, we should really or take something from this. And I just hope we can, let's wait and see.
A long time off yet, I think. So again, before this happened, were you ever a spiritual man? Were you a religious man? Did you ever kind of envisage a heaven? Is that something you believed in?
No, I never really thought about it, to be honest with you. It didn't really come into my mindset. I was kind of living. I'd moved down to London. I was living there for quite some time, and like all capital cities, it's very competitive. Living there, and it's very tough. So I was just, I'd left school with that qualification, so I was struggling to find work. So most of the work I was getting was manual labouring, and I realised that I wasn't actually that good at doing that. So I always felt like I never fitted in anywhere. So I didn't even fit in there. And this is not a sort of feel sorry for me story. It's just literally saying, that's where I was at. But and also I was like hanging out with people who were successful, because I like those people, and that made it even harder for me, because it was holding up a huge mirror saying you're nowhere near up to the level of these people. So I was way out of my depth a lot of the time. But I never stopped there was once I stopped to pray, and that was just before my accident, and I was completely broke, and I was in my flat, and I remember opening the fridge door to see what was in there, and there was just one bottle of beer in there. And I thought,
wow.
well, I'm just should I open that, kind of thing. And I thought, this is what it's got to. And I just put my hands together and prayed, but I didn't know who I was praying to or what I was praying to at that stage,
No.
But it all changed afterwards. I mean, now I have a faith, because, I mean, what I did see when I was in my near-death experience was one of the most powerful images there was this. I saw this huge tunnel of white light that was just closing in on me. And as I looked into that white light, the energy that was coming out of that was just so intense. And it was just surrounded by all these flames that were just really powerful. It was just epic just to look at. And I just knew that this was something really big. And the telepathy was telling me that this was God. This was the source of all creation. This is where it all comes from. And, so I've never forgotten that. So now I do have a faith, and I believe there is a creator, and I believe in spirit guides as well. Those guides that I saw then, I now realize that they've been with me throughout my whole life, but I just hadn't known it and just hadn't got in touch with them. But So you saw this tunnel, and one of my questions was actually, is the tunnel and the white light is such a cliched kind of description of near-death experience, but has it become cliche because that's what they see? And clearly you experienced something similar. What did you see? Anything else? Did you see like a world within this realm, within this frequency? What I did see was there was one point when I was laid down, I started thinking about my family, and I remember looking over the edge of this huge rock, thinking that I'd see them down in the hospital, because they'd arrived at that point, and I knew how distressed they were. I thought they're going to be really torn apart now, and so I looked over to see if I could see them, and I didn't. But what I did see then was this huge sort of waterfall of stars, and it was massive. It was like looking at Niagara Falls. Not that I've ever been to Niagara, but it was like on that scale. But it was just stars that were just cascading over the edge. And as I looked down, I thought, "Wow, look at that!" And the further I looked, the more I realized that I was looking down from one galaxy into another, and then into infinity, into all these beautiful colors. And so I realized, obviously, I wasn't in a small, darkened space that I'd initially figured, that I was actually in the universe itself. So that was where I was. That's where I was based. I know that some people do talk about walking into the light. They enter that tunnel of light, but I didn't do. And they talk about entering different worlds. But I figured that I'd received enough information for all I needed at that point. Then they sent me back, basically, so, which is fine by me, because I know that what I came back with was I came back with gifts, basically. I'd acquired new skills, and I realized not only that they were still sending, and still do send through messages from the other side that are kind of educating me, if you like. So I'm still learning from it all. So I every case is different. So I figured for me, they felt, no, we're going to send him back now. He's got enough from this side.
I can't help but think of some kind of superhero, where he kind of gets defeated in battle and then comes back, but with an upgrade, and kind of comes back, I guess, with more powers and more talents, and that's pretty much what you did. So you came back, and you're now a renowned artist. You've had over 40 paintings commissioned. You can compose classical symphonies, and you've even kind of had them performed and had a standing ovation for your writing.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be fascinating. You hear of people that come out of comas able to speak Mandarin or something, and that they've never been able to do before. Do you believe that, when you prayed, when you had that one bottle of beer left in the fridge and you prayed, do you think that itself set in the wheels in motion, so to speak, and everything that happened after that prayer was done on purpose, was kind of a staged setup to get you back with these talents?
I do feel, yes, that it was preempted, the whole thing, because interestingly enough, before that prayer, a couple of weeks before, I remember I'd been up to visit my sister in Cambridgeshire, and I was on the train, and when I was travelling up, I was sat opposite a lovely elderly couple, and they turned around to me. They wanted to know where their station was, and I got talking to them. And then the lady turned around and said, "Look, we're off to see a medium tonight." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then she was very insistent on telling me all about her and how brilliant she was. She said, "She's not well known, but she's really good, And then she said, "Why don't you come along?" And I said, "Okay, thanks." And so she gave me this little flyer as they got off the train, and I put it in my pocket and thought nothing of it. I wasn't really interested in going. I was just being polite and chatting, And then I got up to my sister's, and there was a lot of chaos going on there at the time with the kids, sorting them out. So I thought, I'm going to go to the pub and have a drink. So I went down there and had a pint, and I pulled that little flyer out of my pocket and looked at it. And I don't know why, I just said to myself, do you know what, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
So I phoned my sister up and said what I was up to. And so I went to this meeting, and it was great. It was like in this little spiritualist church, and I walked in, it was packed, and I found myself a seat. And this medium was really good. She was like, picking out various people who were sat there, and she was getting through to loved ones, and, they're going, yes, that's my Uncle Jimmy or whatever,
Yeah.
And then, but I wasn't looking for any messages. I wasn't searching for anything. And, but she turned around to me, and she said, "The gentleman over there in the blue sweater," she said, "your life is about to change." And I went, "Oh, okay, great." The lottery, what, or the new car, the new girlfriend or whatever, And but it wasn't anything to do with that at all. And I said, "Well, in what way is it going to change?" And she stopped, and it's like she was talking to them, and she was like arguing with them. She said, yes, okay. And then she turned around and she said, "They're not telling me. They just said, be ready for it, be prepared. It's going to be big." And I can tell you that message was so different from all the others that she was giving out. It was almost like a moment in time stop there, and there was something really odd about that message. But so I look back, and I think, no, that's how far back it was preempted. So that was a couple of months before. So I figured that, that they must have just been looking at me. When I say they, that my guides or my creator were looking at me thinking, he's the only person he's beating up here in life is himself. This guy deserves a break. So I don't know. I mean, because there's been so many other people that I've spoken to, especially over the last 18 months, and who've had near-death experiences, and nearly every story is like mine, where they say, "Oh yeah, my life was a mess. I was doing heavy drugs. I was doing this, and then, then they were giving this break. They're just giving this turnaround and stuff." So
that's interesting, because you never really hear about someone whose life is going fantastically well, whoever they are. Apparently, they're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And they never tend to have these kind of situations or these occurrences. It's always happening to someone that needs it. That's almost desperate for it. I find that interesting. Do you think that you say that this was preempted? It's almost like the string theory, where everyone has a place to be. Everybody's life is already predetermined. Do you think that's the case then? Do you think that not just for yourself? Do you think it's the case for all of us, that we all have a final destination, or we all have certain events in our life that are destined to happen no matter what we do?
Yeah, I do actually. I feel that when we come into this world, that we've got, like, if you like, we've got a highway, that's set out for us, and every now and again we try and take a a little B road off that we think is going to get us there quicker.
Yeah.
And, the Temptations and stuff. And, that looks good. Let's go this way. And of course, we go down that road and we suddenly realise it was a total mistake and we're in a massive traffic jam and we should have stuck to the original highway. And so in my case, I was definitely doing that. I was definitely looking for shortcuts all the time because I wasn't fitting in my life. So I was thinking, I'm going to try this route. And so I feel with me that I felt that this whole experience took me and put me right back on that track that I was supposed to go down. And now I kind of, hopefully I'm sticking to it as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So I figure, yes, with all of us that we've all got that highway that's our life. Span on in this stage anyway, because it's our souls continue on is what I now know. I know that the soul is far too powerful just to suddenly switch off like a light switch once we die, and it continues and that's what happens. But on this stage of the journey, I believe it's all preempted.
Okay,
pretty much so.
The kind of these beings that you saw, these entities that you saw while you were in this other realm, do you have any interaction with them now? Do you ever get a sense that they're here again, or maybe if you do slightly steer off the path, do you ever kind of get the feeling that they're moving you back on the path, or do you feel like you're back to being alone again?
No, that I feel them with me pretty much every day, to be honest with you. I work with them, and I think that's the difference. And I think it's something that we can all do. We can, if we start to realise that we've all got guides with us, and we try and work with them, then they'll work with us because they want to. They want to see us do well. They want to see us create in life and create the best life. When I say create, I don't mean just paintings and music. I mean create a good life for ourselves. And so I work with them. I mean, they basically the paintings and the music that you talked of earlier, but thanks for mentioning that, by the way, it's all like I was helped, and I'm still am helped when I do that. If I'm working on a painting, for example, I'll stop halfway through it and I'll look at it and I think, wow, that's amazing. That's not all me that's just done that.
Yeah. And
I look up and I say thank you, because I thank them, But not only that, I feel that they're with me, like for example, going back to my mother, I remember getting the phone call from the hospital. It was very early in the morning. She'd gone in the night before and she seemed fine. And then the doctor came on the phone and said, "Oh, your mum's had a heart attack. I think you better come in." I knew it didn't sound good. So I just grabbed everything, jumped in the car. And when I switched on the engine, my stereo came on and the radio was on. And my favourite piece of music by a composer called Mahler came on, and it just calmed me. And it started right from the opening chords. And
wow.
I thought she's gone, because I knew that my guides were just kind of putting that on to help me, to calm me down. Because I got a 20-minute drive to the hospital, and it did calm me. I felt really calm, and I thought, in the same way as facing death, facing my mother's own passing, that it helped me just to really calm down and think, right, just let's think this through. Let's think how we're going to deal with this, and and to rationalise it. So they were with me, so I worked with them a lot. Yeah.
Wow. So these talents that you now have, did you ever show any signs of that before? Did you have an interest in painting or music? I mean, I'm not a musician. I'm a drummer. And, so it's just a joke. Is it? People often say, who's that guy that hangs around with musicians? Oh, he's a drummer. I don't.
So, I don't. I don't know at all.
I don't write music. I can't read music. I'm pretty much self-taught. Is it something that did you have an interest in any of this before? And if you did has this just kind of heightened your talents?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I enjoyed drawing, and I really did, and I'd love to have done it, but just the way that my schooling was set up, and the fact that I was failing so badly at all my exams, that they'd said, "There's no way you can't go to art school and everything like that, even if you wanted to, because you've got to have English language, and which you're not even getting anywhere near to." So they were trying to push me into working in factories and stuff like that, and so that never came into it. As far as music's concerned, I taught myself guitar, you know, like but playing, thrashing out 3 chords, you know, and kind of like sort of like punk sort of pop rock or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? And so just playing in bands and that kind of thing. But I never got anywhere with that. But that was it really. Whereas the music I'm writing now, this is, I never thought I'd be writing classical music, or let alone be listening to so much classical music as I do now. So yeah, that was a whole new thing that just came to me. It evolved, but very quickly afterwards. And I still can't read or write a single note of music notation. But
wow.
I compose. I started off. I got this old synthesizer that was like sat in my cupboard, and I just pulled it out. And I couldn't play guitar anymore because my left arm had been, you know, bashed up so badly. But I literally started mucking about on that, and this little chord progression came through, and I thought that sounds really nice. I like that, and I started developing it, and it was at that stage that I thought this has got to be performed by an orchestra. But the big thing about all this is that I came back with like this. And it's not, I wouldn't call it ambition, but this sense of self-confidence that once I decided I was going to do something, I followed it through. I thought, okay, when I thought this could be played by orchestra, I thought it's going to happen. I've got to do it, and it did happen, and it developed in a way that I didn't push myself out there. The right people crossed my path at the right time. Like synchronicity started to happen. So that's very important, you know.
Yeah, I think the word that I've kind of just written down there, listen to that, is self-doubt. I find what you've just said there happens all the time. You know, people that haven't, I guess, experienced what you've experienced, or aren't aware of this, you know, this kind of consciousness and the fact that there is more to life, or more to the world than just this, you know, 5 sense reality that we live in. We are restrained by our own kind of self-doubt, and we're also restrained by fear of being rejected, or by being mocked by our peers, by our family, by our loved ones. Do you think that, you know, before you had this experience, if you were writing something like you were, would you have had that confidence? You know, would you have had that kind of, this is going to happen, and so it did?
No way. I would never have had the confidence at all. You know, I'd got no self-belief at all, and no self-love. And self-love is the big one, because, as I say, there was so much love on the other side, and that was the first lesson that I learned to love myself. And once I learned to love myself, then I learned self-confidence and self-belief. It's a massive thing. You know, there's a huge difference between that and the other end of the spectrum. Is like being obnoxiously sort of, you know, full of yourself. You know, it's so I haven't become that, you know. It's just that I would describe it as I've authentic to myself, if you like. I kind of found authenticity that came through this. And so once I'd found that authenticity, the synchronicity started to happen. It's almost like, if you don't aim too high for things, if you're not turning around and saying, right, I'm going to write a classical symphony, everyone's going to hear this, it's going to be, you know, a huge sellout concert. If you don't do that, then it will come to you, because that's what happened in that case. You know, I wasn't even thinking about it. I just thought, if an orchestra plays it, just in a rehearsal, that would be enough for me. But they offered to perform it in a concert, which they did. And then the reason it became a sellout concert, because I really firmly believe that my guides were helping me to make that happen, you know. Synchronicity again. I suddenly, you know, I spoke to the local press about it, because the orchestra asked me to say a few lines, and then they loved the story. It went on the front page, and then the phone never stopped ringing. Then the BBC phoned up and said, we want to come and interview you. And so that's why it sold out, you know, because of that synchronicity, not because I was like pushing and trying to bang on doors saying, hey, listen to me, you know, I've got this great piece of work, you know. So that's something that I feel that's really important, especially if you're creative, is just to focus on the actual creative thing that you're doing, and stop worrying about, am I going to get a record deal, or am I going to get, you know, blah blah blah. So
I think synchronicity is I think probably over the past 12 years or so of my life, synchronicity has been one of my favorite words, one of my favorite occurrences. I almost live for it now. You know, you kind of, and the more it happens, the more you begin to recognize it, and that's the good thing, knowing that it's happening, because in my opinion it lets you know that you're still on the right path. We're still on that highway that you spoke of before, and we haven't kind of detoured and looked for a shortcut. Did you ever have a recognition of synchronicity before, or do you feel like this experience showed it to you, and it's almost like the law of attraction, isn't it?
That's it, the law of attraction.
You're putting it out to the universe, and your guides are kind of pulling it back to you. Were you aware of that before?
I was aware of it once or twice, but in all fairness, the gears were always grinding in my life, because I was always chasing after all the wrong things as well. I was always chasing after what I would call the quick fix, and I never stopped to address if things went wrong in my life. I would just try and get over it straight away and keep moving. My life was very linear, and so now I realise that adversity basically causes you to go deeper, and you've got to accept that and go that deeper to come out of it and find that sort of positivity that's waiting for you, or what have you.
Okay. So just kind of winding down now for our listeners, where can they kind of obviously you've got the book Shine On, which I've just started reading. I'm about 2 or 3 chapters into now. Looking forward to kind of cracking on with that. Can they find that on Amazon? Can they find that on? Yeah, you
can order it on Amazon. It's a bestseller in the new releases in the near death experience category. We're both in the US and the UK, which is great. Fantastic. So I'm really, really excited about that. Yeah. But you can order it through my website as well. I think the best thing, if people are interested, is to go to my website, which is called shineonthestory.com. Okay. And you can also listen to my music there. You can stream the first symphony for free that I've just been talking about. So you can listen to that, and you can look at my paintings. And there's links to Instagram and Facebook pages and stuff like that if you want to follow me and YouTube. So please go there, and there's links to buy the book wherever you are in the world. You just click on that and it'll take you there.
That's great. I'll make sure to put shineonthestory.com. I'll put that under the podcast links as well, so people can just go straight there and get all your info. Just, I guess I always give the last word to the guest. Is there anything that you would take from your experience that you'd like to pass on, like a tip or a piece of advice for people that might be in the same position in their life that you were prior to your experience?
I guess, well, yeah. I mean, as I said earlier, self-love is the big one. If you can try and stop and give yourself a break and give yourself some self-love, because we can all do that, and we can all do with that. None of us is can escape that one, basically. But and once you find that self-love, you can then, I feel, you can find that sense of authenticity in yourself. And once you find that authenticity, then synchronicity will start to appear, and you will start to see good things. The right things that are meant for you will happen in your life. That's what I firmly believe.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, David. It's been the first show we've done on near-death experiences, and it's lived up to my expectations. I think.
Great.
I think I'm really happy that your life, I guess, got turned around by this, and that you're happy now in where you are. It's always good to hear, because there's so much crap going on in the world, and I think everybody needs to have an uplifting story, personal experience, or kind of be in touch with somebody that has had that, and I think that's great. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Kieran. It's been great chatting with
you. We'll stay in touch. I'll no doubt once I've finished your book, I'll start to look at your artwork, and your. My wife is a big classical music fan, so I'll get her to listen to your stuff and tell me if it's. I am more of the rock side myself, so I'll ask her honest opinion, and I'll feed back to you. But, thank you for coming on, and take care, David.
Thank you. Take care. Bye now. Bye.
So that was the interview there with David. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly did. As I say, it's been a subject I've wanted to talk about for a while now. It's one that I've looked into on and off quite a lot, really, throughout the years, and it's one that just it fascinates me so much. There's so many elements to this that you could talk about all day. what could potentially be happening from a psychological point of view, from a paranormal point of view, from a religious point of view. It's so interesting. One thing that really stood out when he was explaining his experience, the whole lying on the, it wasn't a table, was it? He said it felt like a sacrificial altar, like a slab. That really kind of made me think about alien abductions and how many abductee stories sound so similar to that. A being comes and not necessarily introduces themselves to you, but shows themselves to you, and shortly after that, another being or another two beings, in David's case, appear and start to work on you. Sometimes alien abductees talk about tools being used, physical metallic-like tools being used. In David's case, it sounded very similar to Reiki, as I pointed out in the interview. This using this kind of energy thing, not really touching him, but using this energy force to heal him, to make him feel better. Because of course, not all abductee cases are evil. They're not all about being experimented on, or they're not all like something from a nightmare. Some of them are quite peaceful. Some of them do claim to come back, and their suffering or their ailments or their illnesses have now gone. Once they've been abducted and sent back, that they've almost been healed. So there is a good aspect to alien abductions at times. For some reason, people do tend to focus on the scarier side of it and the evil side of it. But yeah, it just really reminded me of that when he was talking about his experience and what was going on. The other thing that really stood out to me, quite on a personal level, is the waiting room scenario that he described, where he said once his mom had passed over, he felt like he knew where she was in this waiting room. It's somewhere you go between here and the next place. And I'm sure for you guys that have listened before, you'd have heard me speak about the spirit box session that I did the day after my nan died with my brother, and we both had a fantastic, conversation really through a spirit box with my nan. And we got the feeling as well from some of her answers there that she was in this kind of limbo, this waiting room. She was talking to other people. She didn't quite know what was going on because, you're in this waiting room, you haven't quite passed over yet. So she was confused. She didn't understand what was happening. And the thing that David mentioned there with the waiting room analogy just really hit home a bit there, and it instantly made me think about that situation with my nan and how much that's what I thought. That there is this kind of waiting room after you do pass on. So yeah, it's and also the highway of life that he discussed is another fascinating thing for me. This kind of, we are kind of on this path of it's a journey really, and we do get sidetracked. We go down side roads, we try and find shortcuts, as David said. We stop off at a services every now and then for a coffee and a burger, and get our energy back before we head out back onto the highway. But I am kind of a believer in that, but more of a believer in the whole time thing. I did point out in the interview that we weren't going to talk about time, but we did a little bit, and I'm sure it's something we probably could get David back on to discuss a little bit more about. But it's always interesting when you get guests on that have the same belief as you or the same theory as you, particularly when it's because they've experienced it. So for me, it's just research. It's research, and it's things I've looked into that's made me believe in the fact that time is possibly not linear. But when someone has actually experienced something physically, experienced something to make them have that same theory and that same thought process, it's mind-blowing for me, for that person to start, talking about how time isn't linear and we need to let go of that in this world, because we are governed by time. We're counting down until we die, essentially, and we count down until we finish work, and we count down until the weekend, and we're ultimately just wishing our life away, really. Looking at the clock constantly. Our lives are ruled by the clock and by time, and time is a man-made construct, ultimately, and it's almost like a prison that we've put ourselves in. So I found it really interesting when David was talking about, not having this sense of time in the place that he was, and how that made him feel better. He wasn't worrying about the future. He wasn't regretting the past. It was just now, and now was beautiful. And I think that we could apply that logic to our life and to our world, and I think it would make the world a much better place. So thank you for joining for this episode. As always, you're the reason that I do this, and I massively appreciate you tuning in every time I release an episode. Like I say, it will be more regular again now. Now I've had my little break and had time to recuperate in the service station with a coffee and a burger, and I am back on the highway of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. So as ever, thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.